She stood in my kitchen holding a folder full of papers and said, "You have 30 days to leave." Then she smiled. Not kindly. Not nervously. Like she had already won. The house had belonged to my father for 40 years. I grew up in it. I learned to ride my bike in the driveway. I watched my mother plant roses beside the porch. I sat in the same kitchen every birthday, every holiday, every summer night when the windows were open and the whole house smelled like rain. But after my father died, his new wife decided the house belonged to her. She told me the will was outdated. She told me my father had changed his mind. She told me she had legal support. And for 3 weeks, I believed I might lose the only home I had ever known. Then I found the hidden key. And that key opened something my father had been protecting for more than 20 years. My name is Nina, and this is the story of how my stepmother tried to take my house, but didn't know about the one thing my father made sure she would never find. Welcome back to Calm Verdict Stories. If you enjoy stories about family betrayal, hidden truth, inheritance drama, karma, boundaries, and life lessons, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today's story is for anyone who has ever had someone try to take what was never theirs. My father, Michael, was a quiet man. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't own businesses or wear expensive suits. He worked as an electrician for most of his life and spent weekends fixing things around the house for neighbors who could not afford professional help. If someone's heater stopped working in winter, Dad showed up. If an elderly neighbor needed a broken porch light fixed, Dad brought his ladder. If a single mother down the street had an outlet sparking, Dad repaired it and refused payment. He believed people should help each other when they could. That was just who he was. The house was small, but it was his pride. He bought it before I was born, when he was 26 and working 2 jobs. It had cracked paint, an old roof, and a yard full of weeds when he first moved in. Over the years, he fixed everything himself. He rebuilt the porch. He replaced the windows. He planted rose bushes for my mother. He made a bookshelf in my bedroom when I was 10. Every part of that house carried his hands. My mother died when I was 19. Cancer. Fast and unfair. After she died, Dad changed. Not in a dramatic way. He still went to work. He still fixed things. He still made coffee every morning and watched the news at night. But the house became quieter. He would sit on the porch alone after dinner, staring at the roses my mother had planted. Sometimes I would sit beside him. We didn't always talk. We didn't need to. Then, 6 years later, he met Diane. Diane was charming. At first. She worked at a boutique downtown, wore perfect clothes, and always knew exactly what to say around people she had just met. When Dad introduced us, she brought me flowers and said she had heard so much about me. I wanted to like her. Dad looked happy for the first time in years. That mattered to me. So when he married her after 18 months of dating, I stood beside him at the small ceremony and smiled for pictures. But little things started changing after Diane moved in. My mother's photographs disappeared from the living room. Dad said Diane had reorganized. The rose bushes were trimmed back too far. Dad said Diane wanted the yard to look cleaner. The old bookshelf in my childhood room was moved into the garage. Dad said Diane needed more space. Every time I asked about it, he would say, "Nina, she's trying to make the house feel like home too." And I understood that. At least, I tried to. But the house already was a home. It had been my mother's home. My father's home. My home. Diane acted like it was a project she needed to redesign. I moved out when I was 24, but I still visited Dad every Sunday. We had lunch together. I helped in the yard. Sometimes I brought groceries. Sometimes I just sat on the porch with him. Diane usually stayed inside. She would smile, ask polite questions, then disappear into another room. But whenever Dad left the kitchen, Diane would say things like, "You really should consider giving your father more privacy." Or, "He needs to stop treating you like a child." Or, "Someday this house will need to be handled practically." The first time she said that, I laughed. "What does that mean?" She smiled. "It means houses are expensive. Taxes, repairs, insurance. You can't hold on to memories forever." I didn't answer. But I remembered it. 2 years after Dad married Diane, he got sick. At first, he thought it was exhaustion. Then the doctor found something more serious. His health declined quickly. During the last few months, I spent more time at the house. Diane did too, but in a different way. She handled appointments, medication schedules, and paperwork. At least, that's what she said. But I noticed she was always asking Dad about accounts. She would bring folders to his bedside. She would say things like, "We need to get things organized." And Dad would look tired. One afternoon, I walked into his room and found Diane holding a pen over a document. Dad looked pale. Diane looked irritated when she saw me. "We're reviewing some paperwork," she said. Dad looked at me and said, "It's nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. Later that night, Dad called me into the garage. He was leaning against his workbench, breathing heavily. The garage was still full of his tools, old paint cans, and the wooden cabinet he built himself. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "If anything happens to me, don't let anyone rush you." I smiled sadly. "Dad, don't talk like that." "I mean it." He walked to the back wall of the garage and tapped a loose wooden panel beside the workbench. Then he stopped. Diane's voice called from inside the house. "Michael? Where are you?" Dad looked toward the door. Then back at me. "Just remember," he said. "There are things in this house that aren't obvious." That was all. 2 weeks later, Dad passed away. The funeral was small. Neighbors came. Co-workers came. People Dad had helped over the years came. Everyone had a story. He fixed my heater when I had no money. He rewired my kitchen after the flood. He drove me to the hospital at 2 in the morning. Diane stood near the front, accepting condolences like she was the center of the loss. I stood near the roses. I couldn't stop looking at them. They were thinner than I remembered. Diane had cut them down almost to the soil. A month after the funeral, Diane asked me to come to the house. I thought she wanted to talk about Dad's things. Maybe share photographs. Maybe decide what to keep. Instead, she sat me at the kitchen table and placed a folder in front of me. "You have 30 days to leave," she said. I stared at her. "I don't live here." She smiled. "Not you personally. But your things. Your room. The furniture in the garage. The boxes in the attic. All of it needs to go." I looked around the kitchen. "What are you talking about?" "I'm putting the house on the market." My chest tightened. Dad wanted me to have this house. Diane folded her hands. "Your father never changed the deed, Nina. Legally, I'm his surviving spouse." "That's not what he told me." "Your father told you a lot of things when he was emotional." I felt like I had been slapped. She opened the folder. There were papers showing the house title, taxes, and an unsigned document that looked like a will draft. "He was considering leaving you the house," she said. "But he never finalized it." I looked at the document. Dad's name was typed at the bottom. But there was no signature. Diane watched my face carefully. "Please don't make this difficult. I have expenses too." I stood up. You're selling my parents' house. I'm selling my house, she said calmly. You're an adult, Nina. You have your own apartment. You'll be fine. I left without saying another word. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. I called lawyers. I searched public records. I looked through old tax files and property documents. Every answer was the same. The deed was in Dad's name alone. But because he died married and there was no officially recorded transfer, Diane had strong legal rights as his surviving spouse. I felt powerless. Then I remembered what Dad said in the garage. There are things in this house that aren't obvious. I waited until Diane went out of town for a weekend trip with her sister. Then I went to the house. I still had a spare key Dad had given me years earlier. The garage smelled the same. Oil, sawdust, old cardboard, and rain. I stood in front of the workbench. Then I found the loose wooden panel Dad had tapped. It came off easily. Behind it was a small metal box. Locked. My hands were shaking. I searched the workbench drawers. Nothing. I searched the cabinet Dad built. Nothing. Then I saw an old blue toolbox on the top shelf. It had been there since I was a kid. Inside was a yellow envelope. On the front, Dad had written, "For Nina. Only when you need it." I sat on the garage floor before opening it. Inside was a small brass key and a note. The note said, "Nina, if you found this, then I am gone and someone has made you doubt what I wanted. The key opens the lockbox at First County Bank. Everything you need is there. I love you. Dad." I cried in that garage for a long time. Not because I was scared anymore. Because even when he was sick, tired, and surrounded by people pushing him to sign documents, Dad had been thinking about me. The next Monday, I went to the bank. The lockbox was real. The bank manager brought me into a private room and placed the box on the table. The key fit. Inside were documents, photographs, and a sealed letter. The first document was a deed transfer. Dad had legally transferred the house into a living trust 2 years earlier. The trust named me as the sole beneficiary. Diane had no ownership rights to the house. None. The second document was a signed, notarized statement from Dad's attorney confirming that Dad had created the trust after Diane began pressuring him about selling the house. The attorney wrote that Michael was mentally competent, understood the documents, and specifically asked that the trust information remain private until after his death. There were also copies of emails Diane had sent to Dad's attorney. Emails asking how she could convince Dad to sell. Emails asking whether his daughter could challenge her rights. Emails suggesting Dad was confused and too sentimental to make good decisions. And then there was the sealed letter. It was written in Dad's handwriting. "Nina, Diane may try to tell you that I changed my mind. I did not. I love her in my own way, but she does not understand what this house means. This house is where your mother laughed, where you grew up, and where I learned what being a father meant. I don't need you to keep it forever. I only need you to have the choice. Do not let anyone take that choice from you." I read it until I couldn't see the words anymore. Then I called my lawyer. Diane received the legal notice 2 days later. She called me immediately. At first, she was furious. "You went through Michael's private things?" I said, "Dad left them for me." "You had no right." "I have every right." Then she changed tactics. She cried. She said she didn't mean to hurt me. She said she was scared after Dad died. She said she needed money. Maybe part of that was true. But fear does not give someone the right to take what belongs to you. I told her, "You didn't ask for help. You tried to remove me from my own family home." She went quiet. Then she said, "So what now?" I said, now you move out. The house had been mine all along. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Dad had spent his final months protecting me from the woman he thought would love him. Diane moved out 6 weeks later. She took the furniture she had bought. The new curtains. The decorative things she added. She left the roses. They were almost dead. But I didn't pull them out. I spent that spring restoring the house. I repainted the porch. I brought the old bookshelf back from the garage and placed it in the spare room. I found photos of my mother and put them back in the living room. I replanted the roses. I hired someone to repair the roof, but I fixed the small things myself. Dad would have liked that. The first time the roses bloomed again, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and cried. Not because I missed the house. Because I missed him. A few months later, Diane sent me a letter. Not an email. A real letter. She apologized. She said she had convinced herself that Dad loved the house more than he loved her. She said she was angry that he had planned for me without telling her. She said she had been wrong to try to take it. I didn't forgive her immediately. I didn't need to. But I wrote back. I told her that grief makes people afraid, but fear shows you who they are when they think they can get away with something. I told her I hoped she found peace. But I also told her she would never be part of my life again. Sometimes, the best revenge is not making someone suffer. It is making sure they no longer have access to you. The hidden key had been waiting in Dad's garage for years. Waiting behind a loose wooden panel. Waiting for the moment someone tried to rewrite his wishes. Diane thought she had the papers. She thought she had the law. She thought she had control. But she didn't know my father had spent his life fixing broken things. And before he left, he made sure he fixed one final thing. My future. Thank you for watching Calm Verdict Stories. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you ever had someone try to take something that belonged to your family? How did you protect what mattered most? Subscribe for more stories about inheritance drama, family betrayal, hidden truth, karma, boundaries, justice, and life lessons. Until next time, stay strong, protect your peace, and remember, some keys are hidden because the truth needs time to unlock.